So lovely that you're here today. Thank you very much for coming. And thank you, Tifa, for filming. We good?
Yeah, good.
Okay, lovely. So thank you, Melanie, also for reading that piece by Monique. Very well written. My intention today is to heal the inner child, and as a result of healing our own inner child, the outer children, the children of the planet, will also receive a healing. So will you join with me in that?
Yes.
Join with me in that intention?
Yes.
And the reason that I'm speaking about this particular topic today is because of what I've been exposed to on Facebook recently is Donald Trump and what he's doing with the children of the immigrant parents that come into America illegally. Have you also been aware of that on Facebook or in the news? Okay. So Gandhi said, "A nation's greatness is measured by how it treats its weakest members." I guess Trump would say these aren't children that belong to my nation. That's how we'd get out of that one. But so how we treat women and children shows how we respect and honour life. If we're treating the vulnerable members of our society with respect and care, then we honour life. And if it's about dog eat dog, the laws of the jungle, then obviously we're not respecting life. So at this point in America, 2,000 immigrant children have been separated from their parents. So the parents come through the border in some illegal way, and the immigration service is there waiting for them and puts them into detention. So before, the parents and the children would be kept together, and there would be a way for it to work itself out legally that they didn't stay in the country, but they wouldn't be separated from their parents. And then Trump, in his plans to prevent illegal immigration, started pulling the kids away from their parents. Now, in the last week, there was enough public pressure on him to rescind that law. So now the children are no longer being separated from their parents, but there are 2,000 kids that are in cages at the moment that may never be reunited with their parents. When the children were put into the cages, apparently the kids and their parents were not linked up in any way, like there was no computerized system to link the name of the child with the parent. So who knows what's going to happen with these 2,000 kids who are now separated from their parents, and already parents have realized that they possibly will never see their child again. So some parents have started committing suicide because they're so desperate about this situation. That's how far it's gone. And the staff who are responsible for these children in the cages have been told they're not allowed to pick them up and they're not allowed to touch them. So if the kids have to have their nappies or diapers changed, the older kids are doing that for the younger kids now because the staff aren't allowed to touch these children. And you know, if a child goes into an orphanage at birth and isn't touched, it dies.
It dies.
So children need to be touched. So this is a really horrendous situation. And it's easy to get hooked into this is terrible and it's happening out there, but it's actually happening in here. It couldn't happen out there unless it was happening in here first. So what that tells us is that the planet, the overriding consciousness of the planet at this point seems to be that we're all separate from our inner child. And that's why the separation with the children in America is showing up right now in such an intense and horrific way. Okay, so I want to address this from the science of mind perspective. So the one point I want to make here is that in truth there is no separation. In truth there is no separation. Now, that appearance of separation between parents and children is quite compelling, would you agree? It looks like these kids are in cages, their parents are in detention centers, they're never going to be reunited. That's what it looks like on the surface. But in truth, there's no separation. So those parents and those children cannot be separated in consciousness. That's impossible. They're one in consciousness. The children came through that mother. They were seeded by that father. So they cannot be separated in consciousness. And I have a great story about to give you the example of how this works. So in one of my early Science of Mind classes, one of my students had been separated from her kids a few years earlier, and she had a drug addiction problem. And so the authorities came in and they decided that she wasn't a fit mother. They removed the children from her. I can't remember now the situation with the father. He definitely wasn't present in that relationship, so I don't know, I'm pretty sure the kids went into foster care. If not, they went to be with the father. But there was no communication with the mother. So she managed to go into rehab. She healed from the drug addiction. Couldn't contact her kids. And so she came to the Science of Mind class with that terrible grief and guilt that she had been responsible for her children being taken away from her. And we started doing prayer work. We prayed to know that she cannot be separated from her kids. And it was within the space of this course, so it was a 14-week course in those days. The foundations course that Gerd is about to teach, it's that same course. It's a 14-week course. Within the space of that course, within 14 weeks, she came to class one day and said, I had a letter from my children. And the children had moved to Canada. And for some reason that we don't understand, but we know that prayer works, these children had decided to contact their mother. So they were already, I believe by this time in their teens or even in their early 20s. I think one of them had already had a child. And so they got together, not in that first 14 weeks of the course, but the connection was made, the writing and the openness and the willingness to reconnect and re-engage. And my student ended up going to Canada and meeting up with her children again. And she was then asked if she would live in Canada and be a full-time granny. Now, what a turnaround, huh? That's a 360-degree turnaround, just based on prayer, just based on knowing the truth. Because for years she'd been disconnected from her kids, and then seemingly suddenly, as soon as the prayer went into motion, and she got the truth about, she integrated it within herself. I cannot be separated from my children. They are part of the content of my consciousness. There's no way we can be separated. And then the universe conspires to make that a reality or an experience. So that's one thing. So I want you now to know with me that these 2,000 children cannot be separated. We're going to know that together. We're going to join in agreement that this is the truth of being. They cannot be separated, no matter what the appearances are. And the appearances may be horrifying and terrifying, but they cannot be separated. The other point I want to make, and this can be challenging to take on, is that we choose our parents. Who's heard that concept before, that we choose our parents? Yeah, my Science of Mind students have heard it. Yeah, pretty much everyone in the room has heard that. Now, we do not choose our parents for a life of comfort. Now, I can tell by your laughter that some of you have had an uncomfortable childhood. So the soul chooses the parents. The soul chooses that gene combination. The soul chooses that language. The soul chooses that culture. The soul chooses those ancestors and all of the people that are going to come from that relationship. So the soul chooses that entire network of relationships for its greatest maximum growth. Greatest maximum growth. It's not about having an easy life. The human side of us, of course, wants an easy life, of course. And when we don't have an easy life with our parents, then it's really quite a challenge to say, well, I did choose these. Like, why would I, in my right mind, choose such evil demons, right? So as a hurt child or as an unhappy child, we always think that these parents are evil demons when we're not getting our own way. Did you ever have that as a child? You won't let me stay out late, you won't give me the toys I want you. So we tend to project evil onto our parents when we're not getting our own way. So the human definitely did not choose these parents, but the soul chose these parents. And I'm sure a lot of you in your spiritual work have now seen why you did that. Have you seen why you chose your parents? Have you seen what was required to get you to this point in your evolution? For example, with my own parents, most of you know I come from an alcoholic background. My father was an alcoholic, so classic dysfunctional family. And at 10 years old, I thought, I don't like this, I don't want this for my life. And I made a decision, I'm going to find the truth. I'm going to find something that makes me happy, and I know it's not this. So I set an intention early on to know the spiritual truth. And I believe that I chose these parents to reflect back to me something horrible, so that something within me, my spiritual nature would know that this isn't right, this isn't how it's meant to be, this isn't what life's about. It's not about pain and suffering and hostility and conflict and argument. It's not about that. There's something within me knew there's more, and I'm going to find it. So I believe I chose those parents to give me an early wake-up call. That's my example of why my soul chose those parents. And now I adore my father and I adore my mother. So we've had a huge healing in that regard. But as a child, it was really hard work for me growing up. Anyone relating to that? So that like early childhood difficulties, but then later you realize, oh, I see. This was the grist for the mill. This is what I needed. This was the pain I needed to propel me onto the spiritual journey. So that's acknowledging that these children who are in these cages are giant souls who have taken on this experience of extreme separation for maximum soul growth. So we're looking at these children now not as victims of Trump's administration. They're not victims. They're giant souls, and they've taken on this massive karmic growth spurt, and they put themselves in this situation. So not to say that this situation is justified in any way, not to say it's justified, just acknowledging the power of the soul to choose what it needs in this life to grow at the fastest rate possible and in the greatest way possible. I'll let you take that in. Any comments on that before we move forward?
And it was Trump's own wife who started the momentum to resist it.
Yeah.
How long have these children been in detention?
The question is, how long have the children been in detention? I think it's a few weeks, but I don't know the date when it started.
Only a few weeks.
Yeah.
Because one wonders what damage those children are going to.
Exactly, yeah. You have to wonder what kind of trauma is being wired into them from early on, and what kind of healing processes they're going to have to go through to live, to survive. We don't know what their future holds, but we know they're giant souls, and that much as we're giant souls, much as we create this environment for ourselves to grow, we also have access to infinite resources to heal. We have both. It's not that we've created a horrible situation and there's no way out. There is a way out, and the way out is always spiritual growth, spiritual truth. Okay. So talking about the inner child, how many of you heard me talk about the inner child before? Good. Okay. So it's a good structure for healing and integration. And Gerd beautifully in his meditation today talked about I can have peace in the world when I have peace within me. So talking about the inner child for me is a wonderful way to be able to communicate inside with the different aspects of my being. So you know you're a spiritual being, right? You know you're a spiritual being, that you are a divine soul, a divine being. And on the human level, you have a part of yourself that is hurt, a part of yourself that's called your hurt inner child. So this part of yourself got traumatized early on, and the trauma was never processed. So, and possibly your parents didn't even know you were going through trauma. So one night you were in your cot, you were crying to be touched, you were crying for food, you were hungry, or you were crying to have your nappy changed, and your parents didn't hear you. All right, so here you are screaming, you're a few months old, no one comes to give you what you need. What do you decide? Oh, I'm alone in the world. No one loves me. I can never get what I need. No matter how hard, no matter how loudly I scream, no one hears me. I cannot get my needs met no matter what I do. Okay, so these are the possible beliefs that get downloaded early on, just based on mum and dad didn't hear. Now, mum and dad loved you. They love the children. Often they love the children that they give birth to. Doesn't mean that they don't love you. It just means in that moment they didn't hear you, and that's all. But a 2-month-old baby doesn't have the reasoning power to think, oh, okay, so here I am screaming. I really want food. I'm really hungry, but mum and dad just haven't heard me, and in the morning I know mum will come and feed me. 2-month-old can't reason that way. So the 2-month-old is just emotionally really hurt and deranged in that moment and makes up something that is not true, but then the rest of our lives is based on that. I can never get my needs met. No matter how hard I scream, no matter how loudly I scream, no one hears me. So I know you and I have made decisions early on that are still playing themselves out, and they're playing themselves out in all aspects of our world. So if you've got a regular difficulty in a relationship, the child is from the child, always from the hurt afraid inner child. If you've got a difficulty around money, it's always from the hurt, afraid inner child. If you've got a difficulty in health, it's always around the hurt, afraid inner child. It's always that. It's always that. It's a part of yourself that hasn't healed yet. Doesn't mean you can't heal it. It's possible to heal into the present. So this hurt inner child is the part of ourselves that typically we tend to deny, we reject, and it's the part of ourselves that has never grown up. So it's immature, and it's undeveloped, doesn't feel safe, very afraid, trying to get control in a world of adults that it doesn't understand. So whenever you catch yourself manically trying to get control of a situation that is uncontrollable, you know that's your kid trying to manage this unmanageable life based on the kid feeling very hurt and afraid. Okay, so scared to death. So I've got another example of this. So I started doing inner child work in the States in, it was 1992. And my mum and my dad had been divorced for about 7 years. I went through my first ministerial graduation, and my father came from England, and my mother came from South Africa. Now, by this time, my mother was married to the love of her life, her millionaire husband. And my father, when my mother and father got divorced, my father started drinking in a big way. So he'd always had an alcohol problem, but then when my mother left, he just started drinking very full time. And so I write about it in this my autobiography, The Misadventures. So I met my father at Los Angeles airport, and he was dressed in a charity shop suit, which is a little too short for him in the leg. So he looked really rough, and his front teeth were missing. And I just assumed that he must have had, his teeth must have fallen out the night before his flight or something. He didn't have time to get his teeth fixed while he was still in the UK. And so I said, Dad, what happened to your teeth? He said, well, a few months ago, I was in a fight. And he said, I came out of the pub, and I saw a few young men surrounding a young girl, and he said they were being very aggressive towards her. So I tried to protect her, I tried to save her from the aggression. And he said that the men were obviously too much for me, and they knocked me over the wall of the church, and I hit my teeth on the way into the church graveyard. So the teeth fell out, but an alcoholic doesn't care if he's got teeth or not teeth. An alcoholic cares if he's got drink. So the teeth were not a priority. So he arrived at my graduation ceremony with no teeth and a suit that didn't fit. And then my mother arrives with my millionaire stepfather, looking gorgeous, looking amazing, looking totally happy. And they wouldn't even speak. They met in the parking lot outside the church before my graduation ceremony. They wouldn't even, I said to them, would you at least shake hands? And my mother didn't want to. My father also felt very uncomfortable, very jealous of my mother's new husband. Oh, it was a dysfunctional family moment of note. Anyway, that was my trigger to start doing inner child work. That's when I realized my family was really mad, and I need to now, address this. So I started inner child therapy, which was great. And then I met a spiritual teacher who had studied with Joel Goldsmith, and he also gave us some good techniques for healing the inner child. So I'm sharing everything I knew from those days. So it's 1997. That was approximately 20 years ago. Okay. So once I understood about the inner child work and the importance of connecting with that little hurt, scared being inside, I started doing a lot of dialoguing. And what I noticed was that at the end of every month, I had a lot of fear about paying the rent. Every month, without fail, there was a financial crisis, and rent was, I managed it, but only just. It was always a fearful thing for me. So I started dialoguing with my kit, and that means that I'm a right-handed person, so I had my pen in my right hand, and that's my adult voice, and I had another pen in my left hand, and that was my child voice. So I did inner child dialoguing with both hands. And I would say to my child, I noticed that it's scary at the end of the month because we never seem to have enough money to pay the rent. So is there anything that you remember about that you could shed some light on this issue? And right away, the inner child is the repository of memory. She remembers everything. My inner child, your inner child, remembers everything that happened and how she downloaded it at the time. So my kid's writing back to me and saying, when I was 5, Mum would, at the end of every month, she'd go through her budget books, her accounts, and she would be very frightened, and she would say, I don't know if we're going to make it this month. She said, your father, I don't know if he's going to get fired from his job. My dad was drinking away the family income, so my mother never had any financial security or stability, and so she would always, at the end of every month, have this terror. And she would even say, I think we're going to be out on the streets this month. So my 5-year-old downloads this, we're going to be out on the streets this month, in complete terror. And my 5-year-old, who got stuck there, kept recreating that circumstance in my life. So every time it came to pay the rent, my 5-year-old's like in absolute terror. Now, the abundance cannot flow if your hurt inner child is in terror. It's impossible. So what happens is that you get less of what you want. So it seemed like at the end of each month there was like clients would cancel or there'd be less money because I was in such terror about not being able to pay the rent. So, and my kid at 5 years old wanted to help. Children always want to help. She couldn't. She was terrified. She couldn't, and she's 5 years old. She's powerless. How is she going to go and make money to help with this rent situation? So not only was she terrified about being out in the streets, she felt completely powerless to do anything to help the situation. And that's where she got stuck. So with my adult hand, I wrote to her and I said, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. I'm so sorry that you had to feel that level of pain and terror. And it wasn't right for Mum to express her fears in that way without realizing that you were taking it on as a reality. And I said, I'm here now. I'm here to help you. I'm not going to let you go through that. We're going to find a way to get through this. So as I'm writing to my kid, there's a knock on the door of my flat. I'm thinking, I'm not expecting anybody. So I went to the door, and actually I was in bed. I was in my pajamas while I was writing this. And I went to the door. I didn't open the door because I was in my pajamas. And I said, who's there? And a client said, I can't remember his name, Jeffrey. I said, oh, hello, Jeffrey. I didn't have you down for a session today. And at that point, I did some aromatherapy massage, and he had booked for a massage. And I didn't have you down for a session today. He said, no, it's in the diary. I said, okay, give me a few minutes. Quickly got dressed. I said, please give me 5 minutes. I got dressed, set up my massage table, and in he came. And I had a client, and he paid me. So like in the instant that I connected with my child, the client showed up with money. The flow opened up because I connected with my kid. She was no longer alone in her terror. So that's what can happen when you become the champion for your child and say, no, I'm here now, I'm going to protect you, I'm going to support you, I'm going to take care of you, we're going to find a way. It's not your concern, it's not your worry. Okay, so now I'm going to stop there for a minute. Could you turn off the recording for a minute, please?